Hi everyone, it's Kurt here again and time for another video. This time we're looking at assessing grammar and vocabulary. As always, most of the content in this video comes from our textbook on language assessment from Brown and Abiwikrama. All right, let's jump in. Okay, so let me kind of have a quick review because we've talked about assessing listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And every time we assessed one of those, I mentioned that, of course, we still have a grammatical aspect to it because you can't take grammar out of each one of those. Grammar plays a role in everything we do. So does vocabulary. But for this particular chapter, now we're going to focus on as a test. I'm only focusing on grammar. So as we go through some of these items, you may start to feel like everything's the same. It's the same type of test item. And what's the difference between the speaking test and the grammar test? So I want you to try to really see the difference in this particular case where before we were talking about speaking competence. But of course, grammar plays a role in that. Today, we're not talking about the actual output skill of speaking or writing. We're talking about or reading, in this case, input as well, when you respond. We're talking about focusing on grammatical knowledge and vocabulary knowledge. Okay, so let's start. What does that mean? What does it mean to know grammar? What does it mean to know vocabulary and phonology and discourse rules? And how do we test that knowledge? Should we assess comprehension or should we assess production? So, you have to think about things like this. What does it mean to know a word? Is it okay just to be able to read it and understand it, or should you be able to use it as well? And how do we assess implicit knowledge of forms as well? So we're going to go through a lot of these questions here. Okay, so let's start with defining grammatical knowledge. According to Larson Freeman, it comes in three forms. We've got grammatical forms, we've got grammatical meanings of forms, and we've got pragmatic meaning, which means the use in a given context. Okay, and we can also look at the morphology and syntax, right? How are words formed and strung together in a sentence? Both contribute to the linguistic accuracy of a language. Okay, so we're looking at the grammatical form here. What does it mean? Morphology and syntax, both of them make it accurate. Okay, grammatical meaning. So that means it includes, the literal and intended meanings of a form, and it includes the meaningfulness of a language. So, you could have something that's grammatically correct technically, but it wouldn't make any sense or it wouldn't have any meaning. So it still has to have an appropriate meaning. I'll show you an example later in one of the test items. Okay, and then it has to have pragmatic meaning as well. So this is the appropriate language choices a learner makes depending on the context. So, for example, what are the right choices based on who you're talking to? Where you are, what's the function of the language that you're trying to use. Okay, so grammatical knowledge then is knowledge of form, meaning, and use, and they occur at the sentence level and also at the discourse level. It includes rules for cohesion, information management, and interactional knowledge. Pragmatic meaning depends on, as I mentioned, contextual, social linguistic, social cultural, psychological, and rhetorical meanings of the context. And they can occur at the sentence and the discourse level, and you can test any of these. As you can see, there's a lot going on when it comes to grammar. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these in great detail because this is not a grammar video. This is about how to test it. But you can go back and look at, and later on there's a graphic I'm going to show which shows more specifically what you could actually test. Now, when we're talking about selected response tasks, okay, so designing assessment for grammar, the selected response, the input that you give the students, it could be language or it could be non-language. And when I say non-language, you could gesture, you could use pictures, something where they're not reading or listening. Typically for these kind of items, you will respond in a dichotomous method, which means you'll use 0, means it's wrong, 1, it's correct. Because you're focusing on the accuracy. So it's either accurate or it's not. However, if you make it a little bit more complex in that you want to add meaning as well, then you can go to a partial credit system where 0 is wrong, 1 is partially correct. Like, for example, the meaning is correct, but the grammar is a little off. Okay, 1. Or the grammar is correct, but the meaning's a little off. So they get 1. Or both grammar and meaning are correct, they get 2. Okay, so here's the figure I was talking about, and you can refer to this in your textbook. It comes from Purpura. And you can see, look at each column. We've got grammatical knowledge, we've got grammatical form, and then we've got grammatical meaning or meaningfulness, and then we've got pragmatic knowledge. So let's look at pragmatic knowledge, for example. Remember, we're talking about grammar. Don't lose sight of the fact we're talking about the grammar, not your ability to communicate pragmatically. We're talking about the form that you use. Okay, so look at all the different choices. We've got at the sentence or discourse level, contextual meaning, interpersonal, social linguistic meaning, social identity markers like gender, age, status, group membership, cultural identity markers, dialect, nativeness. Of course, in your junior high school classes, maybe you're not going to go this deep when you're testing grammar. You probably focus more on the grammatical form and the grammatical meaning, but you should be aware that all of these things are happening at the same time. And for those of you who will be teaching in senior high school, or maybe one day even at the college level, then you should be aware of all of these. Okay, so here are some selected response types for grammar tests. Okay, so of course we can do multiple choice. As always, the advantages are in the practicality or the administration and scoring. Disadvantages are it's very difficult to create the items, it's hard to eliminate guessing, and it's inauthentic. We've talked about this all semester long. So for grammatical form, did you see the movie Star Wars, The Last Jedi last week? Yes, Mary loved it, and... Okay, so you can see how this one is grammar only because all of the responses are positive. I love to, I do, so did I. Sorry, do did I, and so did I. So you can see how this is only grammar because they all show the intended meaning, which is yes, I liked it. And my wife, girlfriend, friend, sister, whoever Mary is also liked it. So this is how you can focus on grammar only instead of, reading comprehension or listening, the ones we've looked at before. But you can also do it for grammatical meaning, okay? So here's an example where two people are talking. Do you have plans for tonight? Not really. Thanks, but I have a final paper to write. So this one is more context-based. You have to understand the meaning, right? So not really. How about you? Thanks. No, that doesn't make any sense. Not really. Need any help? Thanks, but I have a final paper to write. No. How about a movie? Thanks. Okay. So C will be the only correct answer here based on Yuko's response. A, B, C, D are all grammatically correct, but they don't make sense. So this is where we're talking about grammatical meaning. Now you might stop and say, Kurt, how is this different from the reading comprehension that we did before? And you're right, there is a lot of overlap here in that it looks so similar to some of the items, and you might make yourself crazy trying to differentiate. And that's why I said in the very beginning, you can't totally isolate anything when it comes to language because everything's connected. Okay, so I won't keep repeating myself about this. All right, another type you can do is grammatical form and meaning. Okay, so are you visiting your family this year? I don't know. I didn't, it depends on the airfares. I may be, it depends on the airfares. I might, it depends on the airfares I had to. Okay, so in this particular case, the meaning has to match, and so does the form. Okay, and then we can do grammatical form and meaning like this. This one is an editing type. I think that shouldn't be multiple choice. I think that's a mistake. Sorry about that. In this one is where we edit the mistake, and it's just like the reading one we did before, but this time we're focused only on grammar. And if you really want to do something like this, you should try to make sure the forms are the same, or it's based on the grammar point that you're trying to teach your students. That way it's really more about the grammar instead of the comprehension. Okay, and then we have discrimination tasks as well. So this one is grammatical form and meaning. So you see the sentence below, she delivered it to him. Okay, so there's a lot going on here. First of all, it's pronouns, and then delivered it to. So they have to be aware of the word order and that it is a direct, the verb is direct, right? She delivered it to him, not it was delivered to him or her, something like that. Okay. The next could be noticing tasks or consciousness raising tasks. Now, this is a different type of test item, but could be quite useful for students because as you're having them do the test, they could learn from this test, because what you're doing is you get them to attend consciously to the form and or the meaning, and they will become aware of the specific language features. Okay, so look at this example. In the following passage, underline would when it's used to refer to the habitual past. Circle it when it refers to the present or future. And you could give this type of item more as a formative assessment task. You don't need to actually give it to them for a score. And so you can see down below, we've got would. Okay, I remember a time when we would write letters. Okay, that's the past. We would write them to say thank you after we received a gift. Okay, still past. We would even write letters to our friends. Still past. I wouldn't expect today's children to write letters. Okay, here's the present. But would expect them to still, okay, so present or future here. So this one is really good for learning the form, especially if you want them to implicitly learn the rule. You could do something like this. Formative assessment. Summative is okay too, but I would try formative. Okay, so next type of task is limited production. So for these type of tasks, again, the input could be language or non-language. It's a simple sentence, single sentence or longer. Could be multiple correct answers here though. So now it's a little bit more open-ended. And again, scoring can be dichotomous or it could be partial credit. So look at this example. The sentence goes like this, and the criteria for correctness is a grammatical form. I a book right before I go to sleep. So I remember this one is about read and read and maybe have read, using the right form. So see, the teacher narrows the focus down to using read and read and have read in the correct way. So you have to they have to read the sentences and figure out which one goes where. Okay. You can also do gap filling. See, it's all the same type of task we've seen. This one is grammatical form and meaning. The criteria for correctness is grammatical form and meaning here. So the Mississippi River, also called the Great River, is the longest river in the United States. The river at Lake Itasca in the state of Minnesota. The river ends at the Gulf of Mexico, where it's over 500,000 cubic feet of water. Okay, so there's more than one correct answer here, right? The river begins, starts. Maybe there's even a more formal word they're looking for. I don't have the answers with me here. The river ends at the Gulf of Mexico, where it pours, shoots, unloads. Okay, there's a lot of different words that could go here. So again, as a teacher, if you're going to use this kind, you better be sure that you know all of the different choices that could go here. So Practicality goes down a little bit, but it is a little bit more authentic in that you are testing their ability in vocabulary, in grammar and meaning. But you're also testing their vocabulary here, right? Okay. And it depends if you want to provide them with a list of the base form as well. Okay, designing assessment tasks, limited production, short answer tasks. So you can do short answer as well. These are again more open-ended. The input could be a question. It could be questions. It could be oral or visual stimulus. Responses could be just one word, or they could be longer, up to a sentence. And again, you can use dichotomous or partial credit scoring. So here's an example. And again, you're looking at form and meaning. Now, this may look like more of a speaking type test or writing, whichever output you want. But the main point here is that, first of all, students should know what the objectives are, that you are testing their grammar. Because you are asking for a sample of their real language. So actually you can test not so much the content, but the accuracy of the form that they give you. So what is meant by tools of their trade? When they give you an example, when they give you their answer, then you evaluate the accuracy of the form. So it's like when I talked about in assessing speaking, maybe accuracy will be a small part of your rubric. In this case, the accuracy and the meaning and the pragmatic use grammatically are the whole thing. You're not really focused on the content as much, as long as the grammatical meaning is accurate. Okay, and then there's one like this. Look at the picture. What is the woman doing? So in this case, of course, you have to answer with she is verb ing, using the internet, playing video games, chatting with her friend on Instagram, whatever it is you want to use. If this was a general speaking test, you wouldn't care as much if you didn't use the present progressive tense. Okay, then we can also do dialogue completion tasks. So in this case, the input is a short conversation or dialogue. Blanks are left and answers should be grammatically correct. Again, it has to match in the meaning, but they have to be grammatically correct. Okay, so here's a conversation. How was your trip to Los Angeles? Now, it could be anything. But you look at Mayumi says, I knew you would enjoy your visit. Okay, so it was great. It was wonderful. It was awesome. Something like that. And it has to be grammatically correct. So they can't say it is great. Wrong. Okay, and then again, unless you wanted to use partial credit, partial scoring, where you give them a 1 instead of a 2. And then, so what did you do? I went to Disneyland. There, accurate. Okay. Okay, the next one is extended production. So the input, again, is usually a prompt. It can vary in length, and it can be language or non-language. The purpose is to obtain larger amounts of language because we want them to have more creative construction. Again, though, we want to assess the accuracy of their grammar. More authentic language is used. These are open-ended. And this type, you should have some kind of rating scale. But first, you need to design that grammatical ability that you're actually going to assess. So is it going to be their ability in tense? Are you assessing their ability to use the perfect tense? Just whatever it is, you need to determine that first. And students should also know what it is you're assessing. Okay, so level description, you can see this one is from 0 to 4. You can create it any way you want. Now, these are quite broad, right? A little bit vague. No grammatical knowledge, limited grammatical knowledge. But we know the idea of grammatical knowledge is quite big. So you might want to make it a little bit more specific, especially if you've just started testing students. Okay, then we can have the information gap tasks, which we've done before. So here, the need for negotiation makes it appropriate to assess their grammatical knowledge for communicating functional meanings. It can be used to measure pragmatic knowledge. So do they display politeness, formality, appropriateness, and so on? And this type of task aims to measure their knowledge of question formation, interactional forms, meaning, requests for clarification, how to repair. Again, focusing on the form and the grammatical meaning and the pragmatic meaning. Okay, so here's an example. This one is for grammatical form, meaning, and pragmatic use. Working with a partner, ask questions to find out about the other painter. Then, using all your information, prepare a short report comparing the two famous painters. So we've got person A, person B. Person A has a card, and it's got Claude Monet, and it has the information. And then for test taker B, they've got Van Gogh and all his information. And then they have to ask each other who they have. So who is your painter? Using questions, right? What is their nationality? And they have to do it accurately. Remember, it's not a meaning-based task in which the goal is to share the information. The goal is to get it accurately by using proper questions. And if you make a mistake, to actually self-repair. If you get stuck, how do you ask for clarification? Sorry, what did you say? What did you mean? Accurately. Okay. And then you can also do role play or simulation tasks. Here, the input asks test takers to take a role or to simulate a situation to solve a problem, make a decision, or perform a transaction collaboratively. So this seems more like a speaking test, right? But in this way, again, there's so much language being used, you can use it to measure the knowledge of their grammatical form, meaning, and pragmatic use. Remember, it's all about what you're focused on as the assessor. Okay, and here is an example of that type. So here, it gives you a situation, and then each person in the group, member A, member B, member C, you have to decide how you're going to allocate the money. So here you have to figure out which person you are, you have to create your arguments, but you also have to be able to counter argue, and you have to use the language accurately appropriately. Okay, so let's move on to vocabulary. Now, before we talk about how to assess vocabulary and different test types, we need to consider what it is. What does it mean, vocabulary? So there are some things we have to talk about. So let's take this paragraph for example. Recently, we've heard a lot about news and fake news. Then there's news that may lie somewhere in between. For politicians, often any news that puts them in a negative light is fake, but news that praises the same politician must be absolutely true. So the first two terms here are tokens and types. When we look at tokens, it means how many words are in the paragraph. So in this case, there are 45. But when we look at types, these are words that are different form, no repeats. So first of all, we can see the word news. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, if I've counted correctly. We won't count the same word 5 times. So news would only be counted once. Okay. In terms of word families, for example, politician and politicians are not the same type because this is the plural form and this is the singular form. Okay, they're from the same word family, but they're not the same type. So they will both be counted in the tokens. Now, why is this important? Because when you give a vocabulary test, typically you will not test 2 derivatives from the same word family. You will not test politician and politicians because now it becomes a grammar test. You're not actually just testing the vocabulary. So be careful about that when you test words. Okay, 2 other terms that you should be aware of are function words and content words. In pronunciation classes, we focus on these because function words are usually unstressed and content words are usually stressed. Okay, so function words are those little words like prepositions, articles, conjunctions. Mostly they're just for grammatical meaning, grammatical function. They put the sentences together. They describe the content words, which are nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. Vocabulary tests will typically focus on content words, right? Grammar tests will typically include function words as well. Now, you can also focus on larger lexical phrases like compound nouns, phrasal verbs, idioms, or prefabricated language, which are groups of words that function as one single unit. So let me give you some examples of those. We have polywords. Those are short, fixed phrases that perform a variety of functions. For example, for the most part, so to speak, wait a minute. They're still considered one unit. So they could be tested in a vocabulary test. Or we have institutionalized expressions like longer utterances that are fixed in form, like the pot calling the kettle black. Nice to meet you. How's it going? See you later. We have phrasal constraints. These are medium length phrases that have a basic structure with one or two slots that can be filled by various words or phrases. So for example, you could say yours truly, or you could say sincerely. Or you could say as far as I know, as far as I can tell, as far as I'm aware. And then you could also have sentence builders, which are phrases that provide the framework for a complete sentence with one or two slots where whole ideas can be expressed. That reminds me of something. On the other hand, something. Not only this one, but also that one. Okay, these are also, they can also be considered vocabulary because, as I mentioned, they function as one single unit. However, most vocabulary tests, especially in language classrooms, will be discrete type and they'll focus on single word items. This is easier to design, they're easier to understand for students, more creativity, more open-ended answers. Don't always get what you want, like students can put in words you weren't thinking about. And of course, they're easier to score. Larger lexical items allow for open-ended responses. It makes it more challenging. You, as the teacher, have to predict all of the potential possible choices that students have, and then which one's correct, which one's incorrect. It makes it more complicated. Okay, so what does it mean to know a vocabulary item? Now, there are 8 or 9, I forget, assumptions here from Richards about vocabulary. Now, I'm not going to read them all. You should pause the video and read them, or just read them in the textbook. But you can see lexical knowledge includes a lot of things. And it's not just about knowing how to spell the word and what it means. There's a lot going on here. It's about knowing how probable that word will be. What words will be associated with that word. The limitations on the use of the word according to function and situation. So maybe this word just can't work in this particular situation. The syntactic behavior. Knowledge of the underlying form and the derivations. The network of associations between that word and other words. The semantic value and the different meanings associated with the word. Like, if I say the word, off the top of my head, wicked. Wicked could mean evil. Wicked could also mean really cool or really awesome. There's so many words like that, and of course it depends on the context. Okay, Nation, who's very famous for his work on vocabulary and reading, also includes receptive and productive vocabulary, which we're going to talk about for testing items. And then Chappell also defined explicit knowledge and the ability to put vocabulary knowledge to use accurately in a given context, which is more implicit. So Chappell's vocabulary ability come in 3 parts: the context of vocabulary use, vocabulary knowledge and fundamental processes, and metacognitive strategies for vocabulary use. So let's look at all 3. Vocabulary in context is the sentence environment where the word is used, and it includes pragmatic knowledge. So here's a really good example that the book gives. We have the phrase to table something. In British English, I didn't know this actually until I read the page in the book. In Britain, to table something means to put it on the table and let's talk about it. But in America, to table something means leave it on the table, let's walk away, and we'll deal with it later. So you can see there'll be some cultural issues here if an American says to somebody from Britain, oh, let's table it. And the British person sits down ready to talk and the American walks away. It's a very weird situation. Okay, the next one is the fundamental processes of vocabulary acquisition. So learners' knowledge of word characteristics, perceiving different forms, recognizing the linguistic roots, guessing in context, and knowing the parts of speech of that particular word or phrase. Okay, and then we also have metacognitive strategies. So readers who are they don't know the word or they're not totally sure, there are, of course, a number of strategies that can be used. For example, we try to read illegible handwriting. We try to figure out what the word is. For second language learners, there's avoidance. Not only second language learners, I guess native speakers as well. We have the avoidance strategy, which means we use a different word. Even though we think we know the way to use this one particular word, but we're not totally sure about the correct usage or maybe the pronunciation or even the correct grammatical form. We're just not sure if we're right or not, so we use a different word instead. Or in the case of maybe some of you switch to Chinese, or you use other strategies like circumlocution, something like that. Okay, but we hardly ever assess metacognitive strategies when we're talking about vocabulary, but you should be aware that learners are using them and they should also be encouraged to do so. Okay, some considerations for designing your assessment tasks. So in terms of testing vocabulary, make sure you clarify your purpose. You should assess the number of high frequency words a learner knows. Sorry, let me go back. Your purpose for assessing vocabulary can be to assess the number of high frequency words a learner knows. You can use vocabulary tests to assess their progress throughout the semester or the course. You can use them to identify vocabulary that need further attention, and you can also use it as like a year-end or semester-end, course-end test to see how well they did. Then the next one, these look very similar to chapter 1 and chapter 2, right? The next one is define your construct. Now, when you're doing this, there's two broad choices. You can base your testing on the syllabus, or you can base it on theory of vocabulary acquisition. As a language teacher, it's easier and more appropriate to base it on the syllabus because the objectives are already there, and all you have to do is have a list of words that connect with the learning objectives for the course. And so it is construct valid in that I'm trying to teach them how to do something in English. These are the words that match that, and then it's okay. Select your target words. So teaching and testing is better served with high frequency words, and this is the basis because these words are the basis for all language learners. They need those high frequency words in order to be able to write and speak and listen and read. Low frequency words or academic vocabulary, specialized vocabulary, technical, sub-technical words, whatever you want to call them, all these different groups, they're more appropriate for ESP, like English for specific purposes, or subject courses, academic courses. And in your junior and senior high school, you should usually focus on those high frequency words when you're testing. The point I'm trying to make is why bother testing them on those academic words when those aren't the words they really need to become fluent in English at that stage of their learning. Okay, next is to determine the mode of performance. So there are two different ways that we can do vocabulary performance. The first one is recognition or comprehension. So of course we have vocabulary recognition. Deviate means which one? Okay. 2 is to recall and use. So here's a vocabulary recall test item. The restaurant is so popular that you have to make a if you want to eat there. Okay. Here we go. Designing assessment tasks, receptive vocabulary. So we're going to do receptive and then productive, and then we'll be done. So for practicality issues, single sentences are often used for these classroom tests. Now, the context may or may not play a role depending on the design. So in this first one, this is called vocabulary in a one-sentence context of a high-frequency word. And in this particular case, no context is provided. The student has to know what that word means while they're taking the test. They can't guess from the context. So you see, the way this one was designed is that all 4 distractors are attributes of a person. So independent is the word, and all 4 of these choices are attributes. So there's no way to guess from the context. You have to know what independent means. So this is truly a receptive vocabulary test item. Okay, now for low frequency words, you could add some context. So for example, in this one, the hazardous road conditions were the cause of many fatal accidents over the weekend. Now, if you look at the 4 adjectives given, they all could fit, right? The difficult road conditions. It's a little bit awkward, but grammatically it's correct. The problematic, the dangerous, the complicated, all 4 of these could be okay. And you could argue that they are. Now, where the context comes in is the fatal accidents. So, as a test taker, I don't even really need to know what hazardous means. Because of fatal accidents, I can guess that it's dangerous. And because of this, you have to ask yourself, did I really test their ability to know what hazardous means? Or did I test their ability to use their strategies of guessing in context? And it really depends what it is that you want to do for your test. Just be careful. If you're adding context, then you should know that they will be able to guess based on the context. And if that's the strategy you want to assess, then it's okay. If you really want to test them on what hazardous means, then don't add that extra context. Okay, and then you can also do vocabulary matching. You'll notice in this particular example that they have 5 words, but 8 choices. This will help eliminate guessing by your students. Okay, then next one they have is word association. They mentioned in the textbook that in the past, they used to have students just say an answer like, okay, I say the word edit, what word comes to mind? And then you would say some word that's linked to edit. But what they found is this way is not very effective because in our brains, we make word associations. And my word edit could remind me of when I was doing my master's or PhD thesis and I had a lot of editing to do. And so the first word that might come to my mind is thesis. Now, that's the link that I've made in my brain, and that's not wrong. That's just the link that I've made. But on a vocabulary test, the teacher would mark that wrong because thesis doesn't mean edit. And so what they did is they changed this task into this type where they give you 8 words, and you have to select the word that best matches or is associated to edit. Now, you can see that some of these words, like publishing, text, maybe mathematics, I don't know about that one, could be associated with edit, but the real one here will be revise, and that will be considered the correct answer. Same with this one, team. Team could be related to scientists, it could be related to sports, it could be related to together. But in this case, group is the best choice. So it's a little bit different way of assessing the meaning of words and whether the students know. But I think this one's a little dangerous because if I don't clearly know what I'm doing, I might choose sports, right? Sports team. Okay, Another one for, oh, sorry, now we're moving to productive vocabulary. So for this type, sentence completion is very common. Probably you've done a million of these in your testing career. Write one word for each blank, right? Swimmer kicks with his legs to. Now, for these, they're open-ended. And of course, as a teacher, if you're going to do this way, you have to be prepared for all of the different answers. So if you're not confident in your ability to do that, it's better to do multiple choice at least, and then make them write it. Because, for example, a swimmer kicks with his legs to move his body through the water, propel his body through the water, force his body through the water, and on and on. I'm sure there's many options. So you better be sure of yourself if you're going to leave it open like this. Okay, and then the next one is the selective deletion task. Okay, this is a closed task, right? Now, when you use the selective deletion for vocabulary, it's great because you can delete the words that you want to test. But again, be prepared for whether you're going to make it the exact word, or you're going to let them do appropriate word choices. So let's look at this one. The Montessori method of education used worldwide today was developed by Dr. Maria Montessori. She was the first woman in Italy to receive a medical degree, but she found it difficult to practice because Italians at that time. Okay, so this one should be medicine because practice medicine goes together. It's a collocation of practice. Practice medicine because Italians at that time were not ready to accept. Okay, we know she's a woman, and from the context I can guess it's female, but you could also say women, and maybe something else could go there as well. So she turned to education, working with children who had been something away in mental something. Okay, so I would say this would be mental institutions, but hospitals would probably be okay, and it could be put away, locked away, not sent away. Okay, because they were considered to learn, probably unable to learn. Through thoughtful observations and through her experience, so her thoughtful observations and through her experience with these methods, she developed something of educating them. And through her experience with these children. Sorry, I lost my brain here for a second. Through her thoughtful observations and through her experience with these children, she developed a method, system, process of educating them. Okay, so you can see lots of different choices for each one, and it could be quite challenging. So again, you want to use this way. It's great because you're really challenging your students to really see what their vocabulary database is or their knowledge, but you have to make sure that you're prepared for the open-ended answers. All right, everybody, that's it for this video. Thank you for your time and attention, and I will see you next time.